Pod in My Noggin, hosted by CK Sims, creating a platform to elevate, educate, and heal by creating a space where people can share their stories of struggle, triumph, and redemption. CKS Media.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Pod in My Noggin. This is episode 26, so halfway through my first season ever, and I have a special guest with me today. His name is Mr. Dale Walsh. Welcome, Dale. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much for having me, CK. It's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor.
Well, I appreciate it. The honor is all mine. So I have to tell you, we're going to start off and we're going to get right into it. But I want to tell you that when I read your opening line on the form you filled out, it was very intriguing. So, diagnosed in 1976, I have succeeded in finally, all caps, overcoming my delusion of being God to embrace my identity as Dale. That's a powerful statement. Powerful statement. And I believe you want to share something with us.
Well, I do, CK, and this is just a good way to kick things off. I think it basically explains what happened and basically 18 lines. I'm a poet, and I feel my greatest calling is to be a poet. I have an archive of 5,000 poems,
Wow.
and 6 novels, incidentally. But it's a poem called Dale Reviewing What Actually Happened. And it goes like this. Hi, I'm God was the joke I made after killer Dartmouth toke of some primo Ivy League smoke, which apparently caused me to croak because in special hospital I woke with roommate Gabriel, the main bloke who did my delusions angelically stroke, while doctor claimed my brain broke the moment divine gag I spoke, testifying I was only big quack, which clinicians diagnosed a psychotic attack, preventing me from getting sanity back until I came to Teaneck Hackensack to pursue resident therapy program track and deal with my evident lack of reason among psychiatric patient pack who never gave me any slack. Under interrogation, the story didn't crack.
Wow. That's a lot. That's a lot. Let's unpack that a little bit. So,
well, I'll just I'll give the 2 to 5 minute summary. So I was I had a very basically my mother divorced and remarried twice, but basically I had a very happy childhood. Her third husband was Judge Lawrence E. Walsh, who ultimately was the Iran-Contra Independent Counsel. He was like the greatest father a guy could ever have. And he became my father and adopted me when I was 10 years old. So I moved from Abilene, Texas to Midtown Manhattan. And then I went to boarding school, a very good boarding school, when I was 14. And I ended up at Dartmouth College as a freshman in 1974. So I had because I had such an excellent secondary education, the academics were very easy for me, and I basically got involved in the drug culture at Dartmouth, and this was at a time when Dartmouth was the model for Animal House, the movie. I'm sure you know it, with John Belushi and everything. And basically, I was one of the biggest party boys on Dartmouth campus at that time, and so one thing led to another. After my freshman year, I went to summer term, and I've been doing not only marijuana, but also hallucinogens like LSD and mescaline and mushrooms and stuff. And basically, my mother had a mental health diagnosis. We never found out exactly what it was, but we think it was either atypical bipolar or schizophrenia. But she was on medication for basically the last 60 years of her life. So I had that genetic predisposition, and my feeling is that actually my first doctor told me you can smoke pot till it comes out your ears, Dale, but never do LSD again. So basically I feel that LSD was like sort of like the thing that threw me over the tipping point into psychosis and delusion, because halfway through my summer term, I came up with what I thought was a great joke, which was, "Hi, I'm God." And so I was walking around campus telling everybody my joke, because I thought, how could God be 5'8"? And that's why I found it so hysterical, you know? So one thing led to another. The campus cops came. They said, "Are you Dale?" I said, "Yes." And they said, "Would you come with us?" And I said, "Sure," because I thought they were going to take me to meet the president of the university. Instead, they took me to the infirmary, where I was interrogated by three sets of Ivy League psychiatrists for the next 4 hours. Then they put me in a room, shot me full of drugs, and 2 days later, I was in a mental hospital in New York City. And this led to a private psychiatric program where I was, a residential program where I was for 5 years in Hackensack, and multiple hospitalizations when I was in the program. I had like 9 hospitalizations. It was a program run by one doctor who basically wasn't, who basically himself thought he was God, and like when just had like omnipotent power over everybody, all his patients and everything. And long story short, I got out of the program. I got my own apartment. And my doctor, the unofficial diagnosis my doctor gave me was psychotic bliss. And I only found out that I was officially a schizophrenic when I applied for disability, and we were going over the application, and I found out that I was a paranoid schizophrenic with schizoaffective. So anyway, I got out of the program, got my own apartment, went back to Fairleigh Dickinson University, which was right across the river from me, from my new apartment. Graduated magna cum laude in English in 1985, and I'd always wanted to be a writer. So before I graduated, I wrote 6 novels. And then when I did graduate, I turned my focus to poetry, and now I have an archive of like 5,000 poems. And when I did graduate, I used my writing talents to help Fairleigh Dickinson students write papers. That's basically how I made money. I also was on disability and everything, but I did that for a long time, and then basically I fell into like a period of dissolvency, I guess it is. But basically, I was just like smoking pot and drinking beer every day and watching TV with my friend down the hall. And then he got kicked out of the apartment, and he ultimately came back and haunted me for 10 months, living on my couch. And when he left, I was so grateful that I went to the church next door to thank Jesus for getting him out of my life, that I joined the church, and that's been a very big part of my recovery, I think. But ultimately, about 3 years ago, I ran across it. I joined a company called World Financial Group, whose goal is for teaching financial literacy and raising financial awareness. So it really serves my desire to serve people and really help, because economics and finances are probably like one of the major problems that Americans face today. So I've been doing that for 3 years, but as I said, after 49 years, at the last solar eclipse on April 8th, I had like a revelation that everybody was saying it's going to be a apocalyptic solar eclipse, and I really feel that it was my judgment day, and it was the day that I finally like put behind me the old personalities that were stuck on the delusion that I was God, to be able to to come into my own as Dale Edward Walsh.
Okay, so I have many questions. Let's stop. Let's go back for a second. So, for clarification purposes, when you were in Dartmouth on campus, you were doing drugs,
Right.
hallucinogen, that sort of thing. So at the time, you were aware that you were making a joke that you were God?
Well, this is something that will be eternally debated, because I really meant it as a joke. But on the other hand, there was a part of me that believed that it was true, which is why when the campus cops came, I expected them to take me to meet the president, because I figured out I was God. So, but I really meant it as a joke. And one revelation I had back then, well, at the beginning of this whole episode, I was walking around campus saying, "Welcome to the apocalypse." And one revelation I had was that God just wanted to be one of the guys. And that's really what the basis of the joke was. And ultimately, I have become one of the guys, but it's in a totally different alternate reality than one I ever conceived.
Okay. And then you went and they took you down to a room, infirmary. You met with 3 clinical psychiatrists.
3 sets. They
Oh,
had three sets of 3 psychiatrists apiece that I talked to for the next 4 hours.
And in that 4 hours, what did they determine? Do you remember?
Well, they never told me, but I heard that they said I was nonstop talking, and that I was hyperactive. And actually, at one point, I said, I thought to myself, this is full of shit. I'm leaving, and I was on the 2nd floor, and the room was outside the staircase. So I left the room and went towards the staircase, and a nurse's aide grabbed me by the arm and said, "You ain't going nowhere." So I looked at his hand on my arm and I said, "Well, if they're going to resort to violence, then I'm not going to fight it." But I was basically going with the classic go with the flow LSD idea.
And so then they moved you to this clinic in Manhattan.
Hospital.
Where you were treated by a doctor who you also believe thought he was God.
No, that was the second doctor. My first doctor was a doctor named Cohane, and I called him Cocaine Cohane. And so what happened was I was accompanied by 2 fraternity guys down to my parents' apartment in New York City, and they dropped me off. They went back to Dartmouth. And my father had just been inaugurated as president of the American Bar Association. And so I met with him. I spent the night with my parents in New York City. The next day, we went to a nice building on the campus of Cornell University Hospital. And so I'm talking with the doctor. And doctor says, "Would you sign this?" And I look at my mother, and she says, "Sign it." So I'm not going to argue with my mother. So I sign it, and my parents get up, they go left, and I go left to follow them. And Dr. Cohane goes, "No deal, you come with me." And that led to a locked unit for 13 weeks in New York City.
Do you remember what you were feeling during that time?
As I said, I was just going. I was going to see where this "I'm God" thing was going to take me, and it's been a 50-year rabbit hole.
Wow! And then, so you said you spent 5 years in there.
In the program, yes. I spent 13 weeks in the primary hospital, and then I came to the psychiatric program where I was for 5 years.
And was that inpatient or outpatient?
That was inpatient. It was a residential program for troubled adolescents and young adults. It was run completely by this one doctor who had 3 houses in Hackensack, and his wife cooked for every meal for 10 to 18 people every night, and he took care of the psychiatric business. I had 3 private sessions and 2 hour-and-a-half group sessions a week. So it was a very intensive therapy.
So they were houses?
3 houses.
Okay. And I'm assuming there's security and nurses around.
No, nothing.
So you were there on your own accord?
Yeah. because at my parents' behest.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, I'm putting it together now. So all right. So you spent 13 weeks locked up in a clinic, but the second part was maybe your parents' influence, but then it wasn't like a prison or anything like that, but you were involved in this 5-year program.
Actually,
Did you find
actually, everybody worked. Basically, you were encouraged to work and to get out into the community. It was like the Hackensack community, but a lot of people went to NYU and Fairleigh Dickinson University for to fill their days and everything. And I worked minimum wage jobs for basically 4 years, and then I went back to Fairleigh Dickinson.
okay? So that's a different type of program than I had thought in my head.
Right.
So that's okay. So, but clearly, this program was effective because then you left after 5 years and you said you got your own apartment.
Correct. After 9 hospitalizations.
And what do you mind if I ask what the hospitalizations were related to?
Well, it's when Dr. Bonanno, Dr. B, said that I was psychotic, and he would put me in the hospital because he thought that I was going off, and he attributed many of my hospitalizations to the escalation of the use of marijuana.
Different time.
No,
different time back then for marijuana.
Right.
I don't know if that really is accurate though, but that would be interesting to have somebody look at today. I don't smoke marijuana, but I know a lot of people that do. But okay, so the 9 hospitalizations were related to psychosis.
Correct.
And initiated by your attending physician at that particular time.
Correct.
So what was it like? Did you have your diagnosis at this point?
I had my diagnosis from the first hospital.
And that was paranoid schizophrenia.
Schizoaffective, which is now 2 separate diagnoses. But
yes.
Basically means they don't know if you're a real schizophrenic or whether you're got bipolar, major depressive functions as well as the schizophrenia.
Yeah, so bipolar 1 is the depression and mania with schizophrenic tendencies, right? And then now they have schizophreniform.
Actually, I actually came up with a joke. I came up with a few jokes called psychiatric funnies, and one is what's the difference between a hysterical schizophrenic and a manic bipolar?
What?
A manic bipolar goes up and down in reality, whereas a hysterical schizophrenic goes in and out of reality.
Okay, that's fair. It is an up and down for the bipolar. So for me personally, I'm type 2 bipolar.
Okay.
So I have more depression with hypomania. So I don't have schizophrenic tendencies, but I get, periods where I get very agitated or normal things annoy me. I want to move to Mexico,
right.
Live off the grid, sort of some of these urges to do things, promiscuity, all of that stuff happens in hypomania, right? So, but okay, so you had your diagnosis from the first hospital. You move out into your own apartment. What was that like after spending 5+ years sort of in a home with all these other people?
Well, to be honest, CK, it was more than 5 years because I went away, as I said, I went away to boarding school at the age of 14. So basically I got out of the program at the age of 26 or 27. But for the previous 12 years, I'd been totally immersed in a collective situation. So actually, I remember my first night here, I just turned off the light and I was looking around. I just felt so liberated because I didn't have anybody to have to report to anymore.
Did you ever feel by living alone in the early days that you spiraled?
Well, that's an interesting question because I said I was hospitalized 9 times when I was in the program, but I've had a total of 15 hospitalizations, and the last 6 times I hospitalized myself because I knew I was psychotic.
Okay. And for me, when I'm thinking about that, like, so you spent like so many years in a collective, and then having, some psychosis and um, schizophrenia, if you will, or levels of schizophrenia, to then move into your own apartment. Yes, absolutely, feeling of wonder. But I find that sometimes when someone struggles with mental health, not having someone around to sort of tether you can cause spiral to
Well,
like make you.
luckily, I mean, as I said, I had the program for 5 years, and that was like being surrounded by like people, with conditions and everything. But luckily, when I moved out and got my own apartment, I immediately moved into Fairleigh Dickinson University. So I used that as a major support system, and actually, for the next 15 years, I basically was the spirit at FDU. So, I said I was like best friend of student body, and I would go to the pub every Thursday and dance and everything, and they called me Disco Duck and everything. But uh, ultimately, it was just like I've always had like a support system, and that brings up the thing about the hospital too, because the hospital was a very important support system for me for a long time, because not only did it give me a shelter from what, if I got paranoid or something, but I was on very good terms not only with all the nurses but also all the doctors. And I sometimes I would go on vacation to the hospital just to break out of the claustrophobia of the program and meet new people.
I can understand that. I can understand that. Now, you had made a comment just a second. I want to make sure I understand. Is this place that you're living in right now the same place as your
Yeah,
first apartment, or is it?
yeah, I've been here 42 years.
Oh my God, that's incredible. But that's incredible. Like, so your first apartment is where you're living right now, because you had just made a comment my first night here, and I was like, wait, wait, wait. I'm like, same place. So for 42 years.
Right.
And is it a one bedroom, a two bedroom? Like it's not. I
It's
don't.
a three and a half room, bedroom, living room, kitchen, bathroom. It's it's what they call a railroad style apartment. It has a long hall with all the rooms coming off it, and but 3.5 rooms.
It's very. That sounds to me very much like a. We have those same type of structure buildings, apartments in Montreal, where I'm from, Quebec. Um, Long hallways, front, and you have windows on the front, windows on the back.
Well,
Maybe not
I
windows
have
on the.
windows on the side because everything else is connected to the rest of the apartment building. So I just have
So you're on an end unit.
right.
Nice, very nice. So like 42 years. So that's, I mean, that's a long time to live in one place, and I love that. And oh, I have so many questions too about rent control and all of that sort of thing, right? You
That
think
rent
about all.
control is 5% a year.
That's not so bad, but I mean, it's 42 years old, 42 years. So
Well, I
could be,
think I started paying like basically $750, and now it's basically 1,500. So over time it's doubled. But there were some years where we had like a very nice landlord who didn't increase the rent. So
wow, that's crazy. I love it. Um, so you moved in there, and then I don't understand this so much, but the magna cum laude at Fairleigh Dickinson University. What?
that just means I graduated with a 3.776 cum out of 4.
Okay.
So
So like honors?
it's the second highest academic distinction you can graduate with. There's summa, magna, and then cum laude. And so summa is like 3.80, Cume, and I had a 376. And actually, I had a term where I went psychotic that otherwise I would have graduated to summa.
When was the last time that you had a psychotic break?
31 years ago, 1993.
Okay. We're going to talk about that, but we're going to go to break. We'll be back in a second.
Life in Stitches by C.K. Sims. Available for purchase in paperback and ebook on all major platforms. Partner today with C.K. Sims and Pod and My Noggin to get in front of an audience that cares. You will be supporting mental health stories, tales of resilience, and uplifting content, aligning your brand with bringing goodness, authenticity, and kindness front and center. This spot could be yours. Do you have a story of struggle and resilience? One that you want to share with others and possibly help someone through their own struggles? Find the link in the show description and fill out the guest form today.
Welcome back, everybody. Before the break, we were talking to Dale Walsh. He was explaining to us that he's had quite the interesting life, where he had a great childhood, but then a psychotic break when he was attending Dartmouth that led to many years sort of in an institution, and many hospitalizations. Also, he has graduated from Fairleigh Dickinson University with a 3.6 GPA.
376. 376.
376. Okay, perfect. So before the break, I asked you, when was the last time you had a psychotic break? And you said 31 years ago. That's a long time, Dale. So for people listening at home, and for me, my curiosity as well, how can you define how that happened? How did you have all this up to this point and then not have it for 31?
Well, okay, so I had 15 hospitalizations. Basically, I had 2 hospitalizations after 1993, but those were medication problems rather than a psychotic break. But ultimately, So what happened was, by 1993, I'd been in the hospital 13 times. And it was just getting old going psychotic, to tell you the truth. You know, I feel that I had explored every possibility of being crazy and like having other people tell me I was crazy, and so over time I just like learned and became more self-aware, and ultimately I just got to the point where I knew when I was healthy, I knew when I was sick, and I made a choice to always be healthy, and that involved reducing stress, and most of all taking my medication. And I know a lot of people like have problems with medication, but I wouldn't be here today if there wasn't a medication that I found compatible.
I find this really interesting though, because I am of the mindset that sometimes you need medication, but I'm of the mindset that medication won't do it alone, right? And I explain myself. So when I was first diagnosed with type 2 bipolar, in typical doctor fashion, they put me on a lot of medications, okay? And for several years, I was really like a walking zombie. And I was in depression all the time, very dark, all of those things. And then I tried to take my life, but I didn't succeed, thankfully. And when I came out of that, I realized I'm on too many medications. I'm coming off all of them against my doctor's best wishes. But I didn't really give her a choice. I'm coming off, right? But I also realized at the same time is that for me, I need to figure out what goes on up here to see if I could somehow rework my existence so that this and the things that would happen up there didn't fully control my life, right? So I didn't have psychotic breaks, but I had a really poor internal dialogue, like the worst of the worst, right? And the stuff that I said to myself was awful. So I began to monitor and change those thoughts over time. And then after 6 months of being on no medication, I went back on medication, but medication that I chose at very low dosage. And the low dosage with the work that I was doing has led to this wonderful life that I lead today. And it's interesting too to see that here you say that you've had a great experience with a compatible medication, because that's the real point, right? Not every medication that you're going to be prescribed is going to be the right medication for you.
Absolutely.
Sometimes you have to go through those ups and downs to find the one that works best for you. And then the other part that I really find fascinating, Dale, is that you were done with having psychotic breaks. So you were like, what can I do to circumvent that? And so what did you do? What was the key things that you found helped you the most in recognizing, preparing for, and did you develop any rituals sort of when you would feel not well?
Well, this is a very interesting question. When I talk about medication, I have to bring in marijuana because that was my basic primary medication for 35 years. I would take the antipsychotic, and then I'd smoke a joint and say, well, this is to offset the chemical side effects of the antipsychotic I'm taking. So, but let me backtrack a little bit, which is about self-awareness. And have you ever heard of the term Agnes Signosia?
No.
Okay, well, Agnes Signosia is a concept that's explored deeply in this book called I'm Not Sick and I Don't Need Help by Dr. Javier Amador, Amador. Agnes Signosia is a term that's taken from neurology for stroke victims who can't understand that there's anything wrong with them. So it's been translated to psychiatry, and Agnes Signosia is now found to be active in more than 50% of people with serious mental illness. So that means that people who don't have insight into their illness, obviously they are going to take medication. They're not going to see doctors because they think nothing's wrong with them. And so Agnes Signosia is like a big problem when it comes to treatment because you have to be self-aware. And actually, I tell a story about basically for the first 10 years of my illness, I was in Agnes Signosia. I didn't see anything wrong with saying I was God. And the more I looked for it, the more evidence I found that I was. So this culminated in 1984, and when I had a vision of the world being imploded and a thermonuclear holocaust. And so that I called that the death of Dale. And basically, it was after 30 years, Dale died. And the idea was that the whole egoic system of delusion that had sustained me for the previous 10 years was just like knocked out of me, and I became an alter ego who was Dewey Duck. And so I was Dewey Duck for the next 39 years. And as I said, I had that experience on the solar eclipse, and now I'm like, well, Dale thought he was God and Dewey thought he was an android. So everything was defined by delusion. And now after that solar eclipse, that I'm content to be Dale. I feel I've entered the third major phase of my life, which is that of DEW, which is my initials. And now I'm ready to like go out into the world and follow the instructions that God gave me on the solar eclipse, which is get off your butt and start spreading the message that that I want you to spread. So getting back to self-awareness and Agnes Signosia, it's very important to be able to break through those barriers towards understanding yourself so that you can understand not only that you have an illness, but also that the illness can be treated and you're responsible for your own salvation.
Yes. And I think it's interesting too, because after I was diagnosed with type 2 bipolar, I went down rabbit holes of research to understand it more. And there's a significant number, I guess it's hypothesized because we can't really prove, of people who live undiagnosed with my disorder specifically, because the hypomania doesn't register as anything super alarming. It's
right.
You feel bored, you feel irritated, agitated, like all of those things. So, and then people don't go to the doctor when they feel good.
Right.
Right? They go to the doctor when they feel sad. So a lot of people will go to the doctor when they feel sad and go on antidepressants, which technically will only worsen the symptoms of hypomania because they're not being treated as well. So it's the self-awareness in mental health, in any form of health, but definitely mental health, is such a key component to like healing and recovery, right?
Absolutely.
So,
and that's basically the stage I reached 31 years ago. I was in the hospital and I said, you know, I'm sick of always of the, you know, revolving door to the hospital. And actually, a lot of about 5 probably of the hospitalizations were a combination of increasing marijuana and stopping my medications. So you know, after a while, you just get smart to yourself and you say, okay, there's a correlation between taking your medication and staying out of the hospital. And so I take my medication religiously. You know, you ask if I have any rituals. I don't really have any rituals, but every morning I wake up and take my medication.
no, that makes sense to me. That makes sense to me. And so you realized on the last solar eclipse that you have a message to deliver. And what is that message?
That everybody is a fractal of God. Everybody's a reflection of God, and everybody has the potential to be godlike.
I like that. And I feel like that's in line with a lot of religious beliefs as well, technically, right? Where religion tends to murk it up a little bit, but to be like Jesus, right? To be like God, to love and to protect and mirror his image.
Well, to be honest, I mean, people, you know, people might think I'm still Delulu, but ultimately I feel that what I've gone through for the last 49 years since I was taken away from Dartmouth was just major training and teaching people how to define themselves in terms of the Godhead and to live a godly life.
You know, I think people might think that you're Delulu. Actually, I'm pretty certain people will think that you're Delulu. I'm sure that if people were listening to me, they might think that I'm also Delulu. You know what? At the end of the day, if people are trying to do good things for others and to live a life of servitude and just be a light in the darkness that we're always in today, then be Delulu, right? Like at the end of the day, just be it.
Well, one of the perks of the company I work with, World Financial Group, is one of my associates is Marshall Falk. Do you know who he is?
I do not.
Okay, well, he he basically is the greatest receiving running back in NFL history. And
Okay.
every Thursday he has a program with the team for an hour, and basically gives us ideas and everything. But he called me like crazy a week ago, and I don't care who he is. I stood up to him and I said, nobody calls me crazy anymore because I'm not.
I like that because that's boundaries and that's respect. And also, even if you were, I don't think someone has a right to tell you that.
Well, when people used to call me crazy CK, I'd say, and I have the diagnosis to prove it.
So you've always been a little lighthearted and joking about it, right?
Absolutely.
And like, how can you not be? Because at the end of the day, I think really for people who don't understand mental health, we don't have control over it. It's not something we decide that we're going to be bipolar or be schizophrenic or not be schizophrenic. Yeah, we can get treated and all of those things, but like, it's just people need to understand that, like, we need to let people be people and love them, even if they seem different from us or like us, whatever the case. Humans are humans, always, right? And they deserve dignity and respect, right? So I'm happy that you stood up for yourself, because you should stand up for yourself and you should tell people these are your boundaries. And I have a question for you. How old are you now?
I turned 69 in May.
69 in May, still working. And so you're a licensed financial professional. And you mentor to family caregivers to those diagnosed with schizophrenia.
Right.
What does that look like?
Well, every case is different because every case of schizophrenia is different. But ultimately, the pressures and the challenges that these family caregivers face every day. The reason I started this idea is because I realized that the family members of those with serious mental illness are the true victims of mental illness, because the patients, I hate that word, but the patients have their doctors or their psychologists and their team and everything. But especially because of HIPAA, the family members are sometimes like totally out in the cold, and they have like no idea how to deal with it. They have no idea what the illness is. They have no idea how they should approach things, how to communicate with their loved one. And so, even though I don't have letters after my name, I have been through schizophrenia, and I can give insight to them in ways that they can cope. And I've done a lot of research too. So, it's just my goal is to help family caregivers deal with the challenges they face daily.
And it's interesting too that you say that, because you're correct, and I hadn't really thought about it before. You know, someone who's aware enough and then does go through diagnosis or goes to therapy to get treatment, that sort of thing, they do have someone in their corner who understands what they're going through, who's helping them try to figure it out. There's still stigma to this day surrounding mental health, right? Which is unfortunate. One day maybe there won't be. We'll see. But yeah, often family members, caregivers, friends, loved ones, they're not equipped with how to properly care for or approach or deal with, or if someone is schizophrenic, for instance, and you are right, because just for anybody listening, schizophrenic is a very broad wheelhouse of things. Someone who's schizophrenic who has violent episodes, like, or maybe not violent but aggressive episodes. What's the best way to approach that? Do you try to approach them Do you give them space? Is this a time that they need the police called on them? Or is this the time that they just need space and moments of like kindness and warmth? And there's so many things. So I love that you're doing that because it's a necessary support for those who are living with people who have mental health issues.
Well, the thing is, yeah, I mean, one of the first things I do with new clients is set up an emergency, scenario. So, if you have like someone who tends to violence and stuff, then, I help them like, come to ways to talk people down, and to not argue and to respond, don't react and everything. But sometimes, frankly, there are times when you have to clear out of the house and call the police or the professionals and let them take over. And if it causes a hospitalization, then your loved one might be very resentful towards you, but that's that's the thing that has to be done. So, but I say that there are four things: faith, love, hope, and patience are the building blocks upon which my mentoring is built. And those four things I think are extremely important to deal with, not only with with the loved one, but also deal. I'm also I'm actually more focused on helping the caregivers reclaim themselves and their own integrity, because I feel that if they're codependent and they're just totally devoted to helping their loved one, then they're going to lose themselves, and that's ultimately going to be detrimental to to helping the loved one.
Love that line of thinking, right? So it's I and it to me it's new, so I'm processing in my brain. It's like, you know what I mean? I'm trying to like wrap my mind around it. Because you made a statement earlier that sort of just made my brain also skip a beat. So you said the family members of mental health patients are the true victims. And like, so I think that to me was one of those sort of areas that made me feel, are they? What? I don't know how I feel about this, right? And then as you continued to talk and you explained yourself a little bit more, and then kind of went through what you're talking about, like their integrity, if their whole life is centered around supporting a family member and they've lost themselves, like, so I see that side of it. And I hadn't really thought about that side of it before until we've just had this conversation. Um, so yeah, it was interesting because when you first said it, I had like this reaction, and I'm like, okay, keep it inside. Let's process this, right? And then as you continued, I started to process and see that, oh wait, no, you have a point, right? And it's not something people think about. Mental health affects everybody.
Well, it's
in
also especially true if you're like totally devoted to your loved one with an illness, and you have like daughters or your husband or other children who are affected by your neglect because you're taking care of the loved one, and that creates not only resentment by the other people, but also alienates you from the caregiving that you're doing.
So you have a website,
I do.
DoLiveLove.ne.
And net.
Oh, .net. Okay, .net. And you said you wrote 6 novels.
Correct.
Are they fictional?
I call them future fantasies because I'm not a scientist, so they aren't science fiction, but they have all the trappings of science fiction, but I'm an English major, I'm not a scientist. And
Okay, I love that.
if I could explain LiveLove, LiveLove is a therapeutic method that I came up with to build my business, and it stands for learn, integrate, validate, explore, listen, observe, value, and express. So those are like the 8 steps that we go through in my program, and I was very happy when I came up with that because I thought it could be like therapeutic method that could be generally applied to many situations.
And if we go to dolivelove.net, will we find these steps and your books?
You won't find my books. My books are still in my archives, but it will explain what I do, and I'm pretty sure I explain Live Love too. I'm not sure about. I haven't looked at my website for a while.
Wonderful. So your books are in your archive. They haven't been published?
But I have 5 books, 5 poetry collections on Amazon under the name D. Walsh.
D.E. Walsh. Okay, perfect. And then you have Instagram, which is Dale E. Walsh 55
Right.
on Instagram. And then on Facebook, Dale Walsh brackets Dewey Do.
Right.
So to everybody at home today, go check out Dewey. Nope. I'm going to try that again. Go check out dolivelove.net. And I'm going to check it out now because this Live Love thing I want to learn more about. Instagram, Dale E. Walsh 55. Facebook, Dale Walsh brackets Dewey Do. I'm also going to link them in the description.
I also want to say I do Instagram lives every Saturday night at 11 o'clock.
At night, PM?
Yeah.
Mind-boggling. I'm old. I'm only 43. I just turned 43, and I am literally in bed every night at 10 p.m. and I wake up every morning at 6. So when somebody says 11 p.m., like my brain's like, what? I'm like, that's too late. So you do lives. What are they surrounded? What are they based on? Like, what are your talking?
They're basically sort of like a podcast, a solo podcast format. I just like figure out something I want to talk about and riff. And if people have questions, I try to answer those and just see who I actually only started this like 2 weeks ago, but it's something that I'm going to do regularly.
Love this. And so, like, here's the thing. So, like, for everybody listening at home, Dale has been very vulnerable today and very open about his life, right? His diagnosis. He was in a program for 5 years, but you've been hospitalized for 15 times. And then the schizophrenia never went away.
No.
But for 31 years, you've had no hospitalizations, no psychotic breaks, based on the fact that you maintain a very diligent medication, right?
And just getting to know the illness. I mean, because after it was 31 years, so that was like my first 18 years. I basically learned the whole ins and outs of how my mind would like deceive me or make me go psychotic and everything. So it's been a lot easier. It's just like I say, I live life Dale to Dale, not day to day. I live life Dale to Dale and take things one Dale at a time.
I love that. And what's interesting, when I was asking about rituals earlier, like if I give you a scenario, like if you were to say next week start to feel psychosis coming on, how would you manage that? Like, is there anything that you do?
First thing I do is I call my doctor and increase my medication, because I have had times where I'm under a lot of stress and everything, and so I take 10 milligrams. Actually, my dosage for 35 years was 30 milligrams of my antipsychotic a day, and now I'm down to 15. But so I was down to 10. And I was just being very stressed. So I just called my doctor and I said, I need to increase my medication by 5 milligrams. And he said, fine. Wrote me a prescription so I wouldn't run out. And, everything was fine. But everything is regulated to the use of the medication. Because, as I say, going one Dale at a time, things don't become overwhelming to me at all.
And that's interesting because it's I find that inspirational, because you've completed university. You've written books, You've written 5,000 poems. You've lived in the same house or space for 42 years, right? So, like, when people think about schizophrenia, I don't think that they think stability, but you've had stability, and you've created and carved out this life for yourself where you're also helping family members of those that are also affected. So what is the common misconception? If you could tell everyone in the world one common misconception about schizophrenia, or one thing that you would want them to know about someone who's dealing with like a severe sort of mental disorder, what would that be?
I'll use a statistic. It's 50% more likely that a person with a serious mental illness will have violence perpetrated against themselves rather than perpetrate violence themselves.
I didn't even know this statistic.
And just while it's on my mind, I also wrote a book about my experiences at Dartmouth called "Escape from the Ivy League: How Becoming God Changed My Life." So I'm hoping to publish that on Amazon sometime soon.
I have a question for you. When you write this book and this manuscript, is it in a comedic way? Because you seem to be like very jokey, very light-hearted, like, and you like a good joke. That's what I'm getting from you, right? So is this how you also write?
Well, some people say that. I just feel I write in a very clear narrative.
Okay, very clear narrative. I like this. I like that. So that's your takeaway to everybody, is that 50%, I want to make sure I say this right, 50% of reported violence?
No, is 50% more likely that someone with serious mental illness will have violence perpetrated against themselves rather than actually perpetrate violence themselves.
That is an interesting statistic and kind of eye-opening, to be honest. So thank you very much for being here today and for sharing your story with me and my listeners. Once again, www.dewlivelove.net. Instagram, Dale E. Walsh 55, and Facebook, Dale Walsh Dewey D. Go check him out. Look for his book, Escaping Ivy League.
No, escape from the Ivy League. How becoming God changed my life.
There we go. So yes, go check out that book. Also, go search him on Amazon and purchase his books of poetry. Dale, what's next for you?
Well, I just one thing I wanted to ask is that if you want to get in touch with me directly, the easiest way is probably a DM and Instagram.
Perfect. Okay, good to know.
And the next thing is to get out and start and fulfill what God told me to do, which is to spread my message as far and as quickly as possible, because I think more and more what I have to say is necessary to perhaps not the survival of the human race, but ultimately the prosperity of the human race.
Well, I wish you all the best in that endeavor. I know the world needs to know that we can do better.
And I want to thank you above all for your time and your interest in my story, CK.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure talking with you. For everyone at home, go out there, live your wildest dreams, and we'll catch you next time.
For media and sponsorship inquiries, email info@cksims.com or visit cksims.com and fill out the contact form. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. A new episode airs every Saturday. CKS Media.